beyond the sky. How can you dare to try? How can you fight through doubt and fear? How can you make your path clear? Ask how, and your power will rise.
Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into one of the most incredible economic stories of the modern age. We're talking about how South Korea went from being a nation completely destroyed by war to building the massive tech companies that, let's be honest, now pretty much run our lives. It's a wild story of pure ambition, total control, and some seriously high-stakes gambles. So to really get this, you have to just try and picture it. It's 1954. The Korean War has just ended, and the country is literally one of the poorest places on the entire planet. The average person's income was $70, not a month, a year. That's less than many countries in sub-Saharan Africa at the time. Now, fast forward to today. The phone you're holding, the TV on your wall, the car you drive, there's a really good chance a Korean brand made it. That is the insane jump we're talking about here.
So the question is, how in the world did that happen? People love to call it the miracle on the Han River. But honestly, calling it a miracle kind of misses the point. This wasn't magic. It was a plan. A very deliberate, top-down, and unbelievably demanding strategy. And that's exactly what we're going to break down right now.
Okay, so the first and most important piece of this whole puzzle was the state itself. I mean, this is not a story of the free market working its magic. Nope, the South Korean government was the master architect, basically designing and forcing through the entire economic construction project from the very top. But you might be wondering, why did the government have that much power? And this is a super important point. You see, decades of Japanese colonial rule, immediately followed by the Korean War, had just completely wiped out the old social structure. The traditional wealthy landowners were gone. The business class was tiny. It created this huge power vacuum, and the state just stepped right in, giving it almost total control to do whatever it wanted.
And this unique situation led to what economists now call a developmental state. So you got to forget any idea of a government just being a referee that makes sure everyone plays fair. In this case, the government was the coach, the general manager, and the team owner, all rolled into one. And it had one single-minded obsession: build the economy fast.
And boy, did they have the tools to make it happen. Most importantly, the state controlled the money. Like, all of it. 96% of all financial assets. Through a super powerful economic planning board, it decided exactly who got loans and who didn't. Then it set these crazy aggressive export targets for companies and held these, well, ruthless performance reviews. If you didn't hit your numbers, the state, which was your only source of cash, would just turn off the tap. Simple as that.
So if the state was the architect, it needed some builders on the ground. And this brings us to the second key part of the whole plan, the creation of these massive, family-run super companies we now know as the Chaebol.
The word Chaebol literally translates to wealth clan, which is just a perfect description. We're talking about Samsung, Hyundai, LG. And you have to understand, these weren't just companies, they were sprawling empires. One family would control everything, from electronics to shipbuilding to construction, all under one roof.
And the whole system was built on this intense deal. Let's call it the Chaebol bargain. On one hand, the state gave these chosen families everything they could possibly want. Basically unlimited, cheap loans, they protected them from any foreign competition, they gave them huge tax breaks. But, and this is a big but, it was not a gift. In return, the Chaebol had to deliver. They had to hit those punishing export goals, and they had to jump into whatever new industry the government decided was a national priority, no questions asked.
And this quote just says it all. This was not some cozy, friendly partnership. The state basically made an offer you couldn't refuse. You play by our rules and succeed, you get to be incredibly rich and powerful. You fail, or you defy us, we can and we will take it all away. And you can literally see this plan unfolding in stages. In the 60s, it was all about the basic stuff like textiles, even wigs, things that used a lot of cheap labor. But then, in the 70s, came this huge pivot. The government launched the Heavy and Chemical Industry Drive. They basically ordered the Chaebol to start building steel mills, massive shipyards, and car factories completely from scratch. And it worked. This is how global giants like Hyundai and the steelmaker POSCO were basically willed into existence in just one decade. But this strategy, this relentless, grow at all costs, debt-fueled strategy, had a really dark side. The very system that created these champions also planted the seeds for a massive crisis down the road. The chaebols became, you guessed it, too big to fail, and that made the entire economy dangerously fragile.
By the mid-90s, the warning lights weren't just flashing, they were screaming. The Chaebol had borrowed just unbelievable amounts of money. I mean, get this, their profits weren't even enough to cover the interest payments on their loans. The average company had 3 times more debt than it had actual value. The whole thing was just a giant house of cards, waiting for the slightest breeze to knock it all down.
And that breeze came in 1997. A financial crisis kicked off in Thailand and just ripped through Asia like a wildfire. International banks totally panicked. They yanked all their money out of Korea and demanded to be paid back immediately. Within a matter of weeks, the country's entire reserve of foreign currency was just gone. South Korea was staring into the abyss, on the verge of a complete and total economic collapse.
With literally no other options left, they had to make the call to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. And the result was a staggering $57 billion bailout. At the time, it was the biggest in history. For Koreans, it was seen as a moment of national humiliation, but it was also the ice-cold wake-up call that proved the old way of doing things just couldn't last.
So, that brings us to today. That 1997 crisis forced some huge, painful changes, but the legacy of that old chaebol system, well, it's complicated and it's still very much a part of the story. What you see in South Korea now is this really fascinating mix. You've still got the old guard, Samsung, Hyundai, these massive family-run chaebol that absolutely dominate manufacturing. But right alongside them, you have this new wave of tech giants, like the search engine Naver or the messaging app Kakao. And the big difference? These were started by self-made entrepreneurs in their garages, not by families chosen by the state. They represent a whole new digital chapter for Korean success.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, it's that South Korea's economic rise wasn't some kind of free market miracle. It was the direct result of a powerful state getting into bed with a few ambitious families and forcing growth through a high-stakes, incredibly tough bargain. It was a model built on deliberate, top-down control, not some magical, invisible hand.
And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. Is this Korean model a blueprint that other developing countries can actually follow? Or was it just a unique product of its time? You know, a post-war power vacuum, a very specific Cold War context, a perfect storm that just can't be repeated? I'd really love to know what you think. Is it a blueprint or a one-off? Let us know down in the comments. And of course, if you enjoyed this breakdown, do us a huge favor and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.
How can you reach beyond